comes to where the players think they stand versus where I think they really do stand. The WNBA and Players Union agreed to an extension of the current collective bargaining agreement to January 9, just before the current deadline ran out Sunday night. Just like the previous extension, both sides have the option to terminate the extension 48 hours advance notice.
That was the exact statement. We anticipate significant league action throughout this time frame. That isn't just a typical bargaining strategy, so you have to read between the lines. That's a barely disguised threat, and it exposes something very important that the WNBA Players Union probably doesn't want you to know. They are negotiating as though they have all the power and are in control, but in reality, they don't. The deadline has been rescheduled until January 9th. You can learn everything you need to know about the current state of this crucial negotiation by closely examining what's hidden within that extension agreement.
That's the statement that, in my opinion, implies threat from the Players Union. We expect movement from the league, or else is really how I take that. All right. With nothing urgent on the immediate horizon except for the expansion draft, well, that's sort of a big deal. Isn't that funny? We're talking about actual new franchises. Nothing urgent except for the expansion draft. That seems like in most pro leagues that would be a pretty damn big deal.
Let's discuss Toronto and Portland. Other than the complete expansion draft, nothing urgent is on the table. Take a moment to consider that. Toronto and Portland will formally join the league. The league will get hundreds of millions of dollars in expansion fees as a result of the two additional teams. Even so, the Players Union publicly brags about its purported power while dismissing this historic event like a small footnote. For background, the Golden State expansion draft took place on December 6th of the previous season. We are getting very close to this. However, this is what makes the entire circumstance incredibly fascinating. With just 40, either party may end this extension. That isn't your typical safety valve in a negotiation. That is a loaded gun in the center of the table, my friends. Additionally, it displays the true level of tension.
Free agents. Players signed one-year deals last season knowing there would be a huge salary bump when a new CBA is agreed upon. The two sides have been sending updated proposals back and forth and met frequently, including Sunday. Salaries and revenue sharing are the two biggest sticking points for each side. The league put forth a proposal that would include revenue sharing and a maximum salary of $1.1 million available to more than one player per team, growing each year. Other things the players are pushing for is expanding retirement benefits, codifying the league's charter flight travel, and having a minimum standard for team facilities.
This basically means that practically everyone will soon be a free agent. This is the portion of the narrative that is simply not receiving nearly enough attention. You know, a lot of players purposefully signed one-year contracts during the previous season because they were aware that this new CBA would result in a significant pay increase. That was a brilliant approach in theory, but it is currently creating the conditions for total pandemonium. We are discussing a free agent frenzy that has never previously occurred in a professional sports league. Almost all of WNBA veterans will be free to sign with any team they choose. It would be possible to rebuild entire squads almost overnight. In less than a week, rosters that required years of meticulous planning and development could be demolished. And every day, the ticking of that clock gets louder. You receive the
sense that I think maybe they believe they can come to an agreement in January. They better hope. I mean, the league stands to benefit, and so do the players. You're getting a raise, all right, and the league's gonna, if they can get this done, the WNBA stands to actually have a lot of potentially positive attention in their direction, because they are going to enter into what is
A. Now let's examine what is truly on the table. revenue sharing, and a maximum compensation of $1.1 million that would be accessible to several players per team and increase yearly are purportedly included in the league's plan. Along with expanding retirement benefits and establishing minimum requirements for team facilities, they are also discussing codifying charter flights, which has been a major problem. On paper, there are unquestionably substantial advancements for the players when you simply glance at that list. Regardless of how this agreement turns out, there is no doubt that the players will receive a significant boost. However, you must keep an eye on what occurs when you begin examining the timeline. Over the weekends of holidays, they have meetings. The deadlines are always being extended. There is a flurry of proposals. This doesn't indicate that the negotiation will go smoothly. The sound of friction is this. When two parties are still extremely far apart on the major issues, it looks like this.
Anything any league's ever seen. Basically, everybody's free agents, which is going to cause pure chaos across an entire professional basketball league. I don't think we've talked about that enough. I mean, it is going to be like throwing a grenade right into the middle of everything and watching and that's going to be huge for the league and their news cycle. You know? Not only that, but I don't know if they want to try to get this done before Unrivaled starts, which starts in January. You know, that's something to think about too. And then Project B. How many more players from the WNBA are going to announce we're going overseas to play in a new league?
Now, this is the truth that hardly anyone wants to publicly acknowledge. The WNBA stands to gain almost as much from the ensuing confusion as they would from a clear-cut, straightforward settlement if this deal is not completed quickly. Take a moment to consider the media cycle. A period of free agency during which almost every player in the league is available at the same time and produces content non-stop for weeks. Every signature, every deal, and every rumor turns into a big story. Experts dissect, and it would have to be covered compulsively by SportsWorld. The league would briefly take center stage in January basketball news. However, there is a serious issue with that situation, and this is a big but. The NFL playoffs begin in January, and the WNBA has never, ever won a news cycle against the NFL postseason football juggernaut.
Crazy about all this. So many of these players have so much jealousy and animosity towards Caitlin Clark. Not a chance in hell. They're getting offered, even with bonuses involved, a $1.1 million max salary if Caitlin Clark didn't exist now. I mean, and you know what? They still won't appreciate her this week. I fully expect the players in the league to continue to try to beat the hell out of Caitlin Clark this year.
Naturally, there is also the Caitlin Clark aspect. During these conversations, she is the elephant in every room. The one player who brought viewership to previously unheard-of levels in the league. The rookie who was consistently packing venues in rival locations. She is the primary cause of the dramatic increase in the size of checks written by corporate sponsors. Now, a large number of players in this league have publicly and sometimes quite openly expressed their hatred and hostility toward her. The fire hose of attention she received infuriated them. The frequent comparisons irritated them. The fact that a first-year rookie was radically altering the economics of their whole profession infuriated them. However, this is the extremely unpleasant reality that they must all confront. Because she exists, they are only being offered a maximum wage of $1.1 million. The entire negotiation is being funded by her influence.
When the season started last year, what happened? Pure chaos. Multiple incidents in the first 12 games happened. First 12 games. If she'd have played the whole year and you extrapolated that out, there would have been like 10 incidents involving Indiana Fever games because of people trying to get to the brunette that came in, and everybody's mad about it, even though they're all okay with profiting off of her. It's a crazy-ass league. It really is unlike anything I've ever seen.
Because of what we all saw throughout the previous season, the league has undergone a profound transformation. It wasn't only a successful rookie season for Caitlin Clark. It fundamentally changed the WNBA as a whole. Not only were attendance records damaged, they were completely destroyed. Not only did television ratings increase, but they treble. From being a league afterthought, the Indiana Fever became a must-watch on television. Consequently, the league as a whole experienced significant financial gains. Each and every participant in these CBA talks is going to receive a huge, life-altering rise because one player reached a degree of audience expansion that nobody had anticipated. However, are they expressing gratitude? Don't rely on it. The extremely physically demanding play she had to endure during the previous season. Veterans who felt disrespected by her quick success were clearly and palpably frustrated, and she was constantly targeted by other players. That won't go away anytime soon.
I think they'll get it done in January, is my guess. And then you'll have the expansion draft and free agency. They could get a lot of positivity out of about a 2-week news cycle. You know? And that's, unfortunately for them, their problem is the NFL playoffs are going to be going on at the same time.
Hey, let me know what you think, but this is how I see the scenario developing. On the one hand, there is a players' union that appears to think it has a lot of power, and they are making public declarations that sound more like demands than discussions. On the other hand, regardless of what occurs, you have a league that is actually in a fairly good situation. They have two options. Either they close a deal and proceed with stability, or they let the chaos of a large free agency to produce weeks' worth of free content. There is an expansion draft for 2 new teams in the background that a free agency period that has the potential to drastically alter the league's power structure must occur soon. Beneath all of this is the Caitlin Clark dynamic, which everyone knows is the driving force behind the entire financial discourse, but no one wants to confront directly. The deadline of January 9th is crucial because of what transpires immediately following the launch of a brand new league called Unrivaled. WNBA players are being offered substantial compensation by this proposed 3-on-3 league to remain in the United States rather than traveling abroad. Project Me, another alternative team, is actively hiring. Players will start making alternate arrangements if this CBA negotiation takes longer than January. Some of these are actually already. The instant those players start signing contracts to play elsewhere, the union's perceived leverage begins to diminish. Revenue sharing is currently the main cause of contention, according to reports. Like the NBA and NFL, the players demand a guaranteed portion of the league's earnings. The league is offering income sharing, but the agreement's form is crucial. What precisely qualifies as league revenue? What costs are subtracted before the players receive their portion? What role do those enormous expansion fees play? These are not easy issues, and the answers will determine whether the players receive a slightly higher fixed compensation or truly profit from the league's remarkable growth. This is what makes the timing of everything so intriguing. The league just declared unprecedented viewership, attendance, and sponsorship agreements. Business partners are lining up to participate. For the upcoming expansion franchises, cities are aggressively competing with one another. According to every external indicator available, the WNBA is growing at a rate that has never been seen before. So why in the world is this negotiation so heated? Because profitability is not a prerequisite for growth. The athletes wish to be compensated in accordance with the league's rapid expansion, while the owners examine the real profit and loss accounts. You must keep in mind that Cathy Engelbert's boss is Adam Silver. That is not a small detail. All but 2 WNBA teams are owned by NBA owners, and the NBA commissioner directly supervises the WNBA commissioner. This isn't a separate league bargaining with its players. Since this is an NBA subsidiary, the financial expectations are entirely different. Initially, NBA owners did not purchase WNBA franchises in order to profit. They purchased them for community goodwill, portfolio diversity, and tax advantages. However, as soon as players begin to seek a revenue share comparable to that of the NBA, the entire formula is altered. There is a precedent for this continuing into January because the last CBA actually ended back in 2019, and both parties agreed to a 60-day extension before ratifying a new agreement in January. However, the world was entirely different in 2020. This kind of rapid expansion was not being experienced by the league. There was no Caitlin Clark as not yet a professional athlete. In contrast to today, the entire financial landscape was completely different. It is entirely inaccurate to use 2020 as a guide for these 2025 conversations given how much the game has evolved. Additionally, consider what the players are actually requesting. They seek revenue sharing, which implies that their pay will fluctuate in line with the league's success. They want the highly expensive charter flights to be legislated. They desire better facilities, more perks, and greater minimum wages. All of these requirements are acceptable. However, they are all highly costly and dependent on. The league's financial expansion is still happening at an incredible rate. However, what would happen if the ratings for the following season declined? What happens if Caitlin Clark is hurt? What if this amazing increase in viewing was only a one-year anomaly? Revenue sharing is reciprocal. All of this is made more difficult by the expansion draft. Toronto and Portland must expand their rosters. To give those new organizations time to truly establish a franchise, that draft must take place relatively soon. But what regulations even apply to the draft if there isn't a CBA? Which salary cap is applicable? How is it possible to carry out an expansion draft when you have no idea what the league's financial structure will be? This implies that either the expansion itself is postponed or this is resolved really quickly. Additionally, the expansion payments are delayed if the expansion is postponed. Additionally, all of the financial estimates that everyone is bargaining around become totally out of date if those fees are delayed. The nuclear option that no one is really discussing in public is free agency. Without a CBA in place, teams cannot plan, budgets cannot be made, and rosters cannot be created if almost every player enters the market at the same time. It would be a complete organizational disaster. Yes. A few teams would gain. Teams in desirable cities with enough of cap flexibility might revamp their entire team in a single day. However, small market clubs, teams with little financial flexibility, and teams that carefully constructed their lineups during the draft, they would be crushed. Years of meticulous roster building might be undone in a single free agency season. This is the element that the players' union should be most concerned about. It's possible that the league is secretly cool with such mayhem. Content is produced by controversy. Viewers are drawn in by drama. An entirely disorganized free agency period during which each team's roster would take over the sports media for weeks if it were completely rearranged. It would be unheard of. It would be extremely captivating television, but it would also be messy. The league would receive a great deal of attention, but it would also lose some stability. That's not a bad trade-off for a league that's working hard to increase its viewership. Where does it all end, then? They'll probably reach an agreement in early January, just before things become very hectic. Both parties will preserve their dignity. The players will get their raise and their improved conditions, and the league will get cost, tranquility of labor and assurance. Everyone will advance, the expansion draft will take place, and free agency will continue under the new regulations. However, the fact that both parties can end the present extension with only 48 hours' notice and that we are this near to the deadline with public pronouncements that sound like threats indicates that this discussion is significantly more controversial than either party likes to acknowledge in public. Whether they will close a deal is not the true question. They most likely will. What that final agreement discloses about who is genuinely in control of this deal. Furthermore, it appears like the players' union underestimated their position based on everything we've seen, including the timing, the public remarks, the readiness to talk during holidays, and this shortened deadline. They are negotiating as though they could simply walk away. Walk away to what, though? To overseas contracts that necessitate leaving the nation, or to other leagues that pay less. Under investigation, the leverage they believe they currently have absolutely disappears. What will happen, in your opinion, if this isn't settled by January? Are the players? Do unions truly have the power to demand a better deal, or are they merely playing a weak hand? I want to know if you notice anything that I'm missing, so please share your forecast in the comments section below. This whole thing may go south very quickly.